Well, okay, we're going to get started. Welcome. I'm Becky Gillen. I oversee voter services at the League, and that means I am in charge of putting on these debates. And this is the first of 4 in the next few weeks. And I'm really excited because there's actually real people in the room. Not everyone is on Zoom. So I think that's really great. So you're here to listen to the Selectperson and the First Selectperson debates. And I have to say, I know people always do this, but we really do have to thank a lot of people, because we have greeters like Helene Weiner and Nancy Duffy, Jane Brash. We have timers, Joanne Stavro and Kathy Bergweger. We have Horst Trebby and Don Conway doing the technology. Thank you very much. And we have facilities that help me put up the sign, like John Thompson and Steve O'Hurley, and even Tammy Warren, who actually reserves the rooms. So tonight, we're going to be also assisted by Kay Maxwell, who is the moderator. She is former head of the League at the Connecticut level and the national level. She lives in Stamford, so she has no skin in the game about what happens in Greenwich politics. And she's being assisted by Hannah Klingbeil, who is a Greenwich High School student and also on the board of the League. Now, I will say, I really don't want people to video the entire event, whether you're on Zoom or in the room. We are videoing this, and we will put it up on our website in the next day or so if you want to look at it again and again and again. You probably will, I think. And also, because this room is basically full, I really hope there's not a whole lot of applauding, clapping, yelling, and screaming. You know, it's not a library atmosphere, but I don't want, a lot of cheering and things going on. So I have to say, finally, that the League is a nonpartisan 501c3. We've been in, the League itself has been around for over a century trying to promote voting and fundamental rights for all Americans, and particularly this League to empower Greenwich citizens to be educated and engaged in the voting process. So the debate tonight and the one tomorrow and the one next week and the following week are really part of our educational mission, if you will. So, all right, Kay, over to you.
All right, thank you very much, and welcome everyone. We thank you for joining us in person, as Becky said. And whether it's in person via Channel 79, YouTube at Greenwich Community Television, or Zoom, these debates are also being recorded and will be available at lwvgreenwich.org. I remember the old days when in person was the only option, and now we have so many. Now, our purpose this evening, obviously, is to provide you with an opportunity to hear the candidates' views on the issues that are facing Greenwich. The first debate is between the 2 candidates for Selectperson, and the second debate will be between the 2 candidates for First Selectperson. The format is designed to allow the candidates time to discuss the issues. The only rule is that the total time used by each candidate by the end of the debate be approximately the same. The questions are going to be posed this evening by Greenwich High School student Hannah Klingbeil, but the questions themselves have come from the public ahead of time. So I want to make that clear. The questions have come from you out there in many forms. Now, the candidates are not restricted to 1 or 2 minute responses. Instead, they can spend as little or as much time as they feel is appropriate to discuss each issue. Our goal is to encourage some debate. The candidates will take turns being the first to respond to a question, and following the question period, each candidate will be making a 2-minute closing statement. Members of the League of Women Voters are serving as timers for the debates, and they're going to keep me and the candidates informed of the time expended. If a serious imbalance in time used should occur any time during the course of the debate, I'll call it to their attention and we'll see that it's corrected. So it's now my pleasure to introduce the candidates for Selectperson. To my immediate left is Democrat Janet Stone McGuigan, and to her left is Republican Lauren Rabin. And now to the, you can applaud. Applause now and at the end will be perfectly appropriate. All right, and now to the debate. And Janet is the first candidate to respond. So Hannah, will you pose the first question, please?
Yep, thank you. So, if elected, what would be your highest priority to address in your term?
So there's a lot of priorities, but I was once told one can only have one priority. So definitely, I think that the board would benefit from greater transparency and public discussion. So there's a lot of ways that that could happen. I'll just use as an example, among our many responsibilities, we need to appoint and nominate volunteers to our many commissions, boards, and committees. FOIA, the Freedom of Information Act, allows us to do those interviews in confidence. But I think that it would be very helpful if the community knew who was being interviewed and for what committees. So that's one example of ways that we could introduce more transparency into the board. And public participation, we definitely need more forums where the public can come forward and we can have open discussions. Here's a great example is, for instance, one item that I did put forward, but had I not put forward, we would not have had a discussion, was the Fair Rent Commission. We would have just overlooked it. I did bring it up. So that's a good example of one where we, where a full discussion was very important, because if you look at our community, over 30% of our town rents, we know that rents are going up. So we know that this commission is very important. We also know that if it's implemented properly, and right now it's going through the RTM, not many cases will come forward, and most of them will be resolved before they even came before the commission. So those, right now, that's an example, and I have more, but I'm going to hand over to my colleague.
Yes, Laura, the same question.
Thank you. Sorry. Thank you, and welcome everyone. And I'm really happy to be here in this forum. Just to shed some light on what my opponent had said, we do interview a lot of people for the boards, commissions, and committees, and not everybody gets the role. It's fabulous that we have so many volunteers that are willing, but think of it kind of as a job interview. And would you want to know publicly, or have your residents know publicly, the people who didn't get selected by the Board of Selectmen? So for example, Central Middle School, we had 19 candidates for 7 spots. I wonder how those folks would have felt if everyone knew that they didn't get the role. And it's a great idea, the bringing up of the Fair Rent Commission, but no one has all the ideas. That's why we're a 3-member board, and we all have the opportunity to bring up topics and discuss them and debate them. My biggest priority continues to be, I answered it in the questionnaire, what I hear from everybody, every district, every door, the thing that we could all agree on is the traffic and the unsafe driving and pedestrian safety in our town. So I want to continue to work with all the town departments that are responsible for that. Really excited. There was a forum, the Active Transportation Task Force, a lot of great ideas coming out of that. That was something that we as the Board of Selectmen put that committee together, because we're always learning and trying to understand what's going on. And I think that's what everybody collectively could agree as being a top priority.
Anything else on that question? Are you ready for the next one? All right, next question, Hannah.
What have you done, and what is your plan going forward to reduce energy consumption and improve sustainability?
And Laura, you're the first to respond.
Thank you. So I am part of the energy, not part of it, but we established the Energy Management Committee, and they're the team that's looking at all of our public properties, both the town-owned properties and the Board of Education. And we have empowered them to come up with ideas on how we can reduce energy consumption. Also, the bicycle task force. If we can get more cars off the road, that would help with sustainability. And this is an idea I keep throwing out and it doesn't get traction, but I'm just going to keep throwing it out anyway. We need to get more kids on the school buses. The mileage for what a student qualifies to get to Greenwich High School has not changed in the 40 years that I used to walk to Greenwich High School. It's 2 miles one way. And in this day and age, I don't think most children would walk. They have their equipment, they have, if they play musical instruments, they have their books. So, just that might be an opportunity. It would cost more money to do that. And maybe that's why it hasn't had so much traction.
Janet?
Yes, so the Energy Management Advisory Committee that my colleague just referred to is fantastic. And I am the liaison from this board. I've attended every meeting. I can't tell you the kind of experience and expertise that is on this panel. I have to say though, I've been disappointed that we haven't empowered them more and followed their recommendations. They had an annual report from last year, which at this point the town has bought 1 electric vehicle, but there's so much more we can do. And its next annual report is due any day now. But I won't bore you with the technical ideas, but there's virtual net metering that the town could take on that would give us money. And we have solar panels that we could put on the Eastern Greenwich Civic Center. There's an RFP out right now. Again, the town doesn't even have to own the system. We could just lease it. And again, at very little risk to the town. I am also the co-chair of the Greenwich Sustainability Committee, which is a fantastic town committee. I want to preface, since I'm championing them at a debate, that they are very much nonpartisan, and that's the ethos of this committee, because there really isn't, any such thing as a Republican, waterway or Democratic air. I mean, our Earth, serves us all, but they have done an amazing job. I am so proud to be a part of it. And I would like to see, again, their presence in this town elevated. And lastly, I just have to give a shout out to our youth commission, the town's youth commission, because these kids are amazing. What they've done, I mean, a lot of the projects that they've taken on are exactly sustainability minded. There is a group of students from Brunswick and Greenwich Academy who have actually started their own 501c3, which I think I would challenge any adult to do that. And they are also looking into green energy. So, and we have reached out to them and worked with them. So there's a lot that we could do, and I hope that we continue down that path.
Any other comment on that question?
So speaking of the youth, thank you for reminding me, Janet. We also passed the climate resolution, which was brought to us by students, so that we put a plan together to address climate change and sustainability. The goal was to have the plan by December of this year, and it's being developed by the Conservation Commission.
Okay, next question. And Janet, you're first to respond.
Do you have a comprehensive plan to foster pedestrian and bicyclist safety throughout the town? If so, please elaborate.
So yes, I am not officially on the active transport task force, but I have attended every meeting. And again, our appointed and our volunteer commissions and boards and committees are fantastic. They have a lot of really good ideas. Like I said, I think it's just a matter of we have really heretofore not really empowered them, and I'd like to see them empowered, but they have a lot of ideas that would not be that expensive. And probably first and foremost would be for the town to adopt a complete streets policy, which means every time we look at a transportation project, that we're not just looking at cars, we're looking at the aspects of pedestrian safety, bicyclists, whether it's accommodating to people with disabilities, all of that.
So I too support the work of the active transportation and the desire to create a complete streets project and plan so that all the departments that service the town could understand, what the needs are and address them systematically. Because Greenwich is a big town. We have a lot of miles of road. We have a lot of cars on the road. It's not an overnight fix. The thing that I would also add is we need a lot of community input and residential neighborhood input and really getting out. The forum was, I think, about a week and a half ago. I'm not sure how many people were in the room. I got stuck on Zoom. But when we go out and talk to the neighborhoods and just really kind of stand there on the corners and understand what's going on, we're dealing with it. Central Middle School Building Committee, all the traffic around Central Middle School. I live in Glenville, met with residents, in that area. So it's interesting to get their feedback because a lot of these changes are going to need their buy-in too. If we have to increase the size of the roads and take people's personal property, they need to be invested in that. Sometimes adding a sidewalk seems like a really good idea. And then you go to the residents who are going to have to shovel that sidewalk or lose part of their property to the sidewalk. And it's not always in their desire to do so. So I would do more residential neighborhood input to whatever we're thinking about, whatever we're planning, and make sure we have that buy-in.
Anything else on that question? And I would just remind you that it's not necessary to look at me or the questioner. Look at the audience and the camera, because I know the inclination is to look back to the person who's asked the question, but all right. Laura, you're the
For the
first.
reminder.
You're the first one to answer this question. And Hannah?
Our municipal nursing home is a unique community resource for all. Do you believe it should remain town-owned and professionally operated, or lose control and shift it to a for-profit?
So this is an interesting question. I think enough people in the audience know that my mother is a resident of Nathaniel Witherall. She's in the long-term care. She is extremely happy there, is very satisfied with the level of care. And as her daughter and her only close relative, I could sleep at night. I know that there's financial challenges. I know that there's been management issues. I know that the town has subsidized the facility a great deal. I'm excited about some of the new board members that are going to be on the Nathaniel Witherall board. And I think that they're really working to do more management. Interestingly enough, back to the boards, commissions, and committees, we have a pretty good track record of the people that we put forward to the RTM. I think there's only been maybe 5 or 6 in the 4 years that I've been on the Board of Selectmen that the RTM had questions on. And if it was 5, 4 of them was the Nathaniel Witherall board. So it's something that people are talking about. They're passionate about. There's, both sides. Personally, I would like to see us really investigate the opportunity and be really, really, really super clear that we couldn't do it on our own.
Janet?
Sure. So there's a lot to unpack here. I'll start though with the question that says, should this facility remain town-owned? That's really a non-question, because if you look at the condition of the gift from the Witheralls, the facility has to remain in the hands of the town. If we were to sell it, all of the proceeds go to the heirs of the Witheralls. So we're not going to be selling it anytime soon. But so the real question is, how do we manage it? And I'm open. Like my colleague, my dad spent some time not in the long-term care, but in the rehabilitation care. I feel very strongly that within the boundaries of this town, we need a very high quality care facility. But how it gets managed, I think, is a different question. I don't necessarily believe that the town itself has to manage it. I think that we could outsource it. I do have concerns though about if we were to hand it over to a for-profit manager, because I'm not sure that, like I said, that the focus needs to be on the quality of care and not necessarily the bottom line.
Anything else on that question?
No,
Okay. Next question, and Janet, you are the first to respond to this one.
Our schools are in desperate need of repairs, updates, and upgrades. What are your thoughts on how to get this work done?
Again, there's a lot to unpack. And financing the projects doesn't really come under the Board of Selectmen. But who goes on to these building committees does. We nominate and appoint. And I think that it is incredibly important to pay attention to who we're putting on these boards. So my colleague just referenced it, a recent RTM meeting when the RTM was asked to confirm an appointment to a building committee. I did not vote along the same lines. It's very rare. Most of the time it is an easy, straightforward vote. It's 3-0. In this case, it was 2-1. And I asked the community when that happens, one has to pay attention. That is, I think, the most important way that these facilities are going to be rebuilt is through the building committees. We have a good process, and we should let them do their work.
Laura?
Yes, and we actually have 4 building committees going on at the same time, which is highly unusual. And it's GHS, Central Middle School, Julian Curtis, and Old Greenwich. Fully support the work of the building committees and the needs of our school infrastructure. We also have to think about the capacity. So yes, it's a financial consideration, but it's also the capacity to deliver. We have a lot of open projects. So just full transparency, I make myself little note cards, and I did this debate 2 years ago and did the debate 4 years ago. And I wrote down how much money was in open projects for the Board of Education. So 2 years ago, it was $53 million. So that meant that we had allocated $53 million for projects to improve infrastructure in the schools. As of September 15th, it's $88 million. So it's not just a financial consideration, it's a capacity. And it's not just building committees, because building committees don't build. They actually have to hire the architects, hire the construction managers. And a big component of the building committee is who are in our facilities departments within either the town side or the Board of Education side, and what's their capacity and what's their capacity to move forward. I think there was the question about energy efficiency, net zero. We have to get to the place where we're net zero and sustainable, but we also need the staff to be able to work those systems. So it's not just a financial issue, but I want to be clear, 100% support Old Greenwich and Central Middle School as they are being proposed.
Anything else? Go ahead.
So I will respond. I don't want to get too into the weeds, but I've learned so much. Not to mention, I do have a civil engineering degree. That's not a requirement for someone to work on the Board of Selectmen, but it's really useful in these cases. And if you look to the point of capacity, our building committees are getting smarter and smarter. If we hire commissioning agents, that will help. And if we listen again to our Energy Management Advisory Committee, there's a lot of systems, HVAC systems, heating systems that we can outsource. We don't have to worry about what our staff is trained to do necessarily.
Anything else? All right. Laura, you're the first to respond to the next question.
What is your view on public-private partnerships to help fund or support capital projects, and what types of projects?
Sorry. So I support public-private partnerships. It's a way of, facilitating and, when finances are a component to preventing us from moving forward, it is a way for town residents that, care about a certain project, just like they care about nonprofits, just like PTAs care about, the schools that they support. It's an opportunity for people to, make contributions for something to move forward. And can you just repeat the question again?
Sure.
Of course. So what is your view on public-private partnerships to help fund or support capital projects, and what types of projects?
So the types of projects I think have to not have any sort of political or any kind of like controversial component to it. And I'm thinking of, we have the Eastern Greenwich Civic Center, which is going to serve the entire town. And through the generosity of the Cohen Foundation, we're able to move that long-standing project forward. Maybe it's the rink. I don't think that we would like rename schools, for somebody that was a benefactor. But it's something that serves the public and doesn't have some kind of controversial component to it.
Janet?
So when they work really well. But I would posit that the kind of private-public partnerships that I think work well are the junior league. Full disclosure, I am a sustainer of the junior league. Those types of projects that the junior league, like the Byram Pool, fabulous. That's an example of a partnership that has worked really well. I think I was disappointed actually with the Eastern Greenwich Civic Center. I don't want to sound like I'm disparaging a very generous gift, because $5 million is a lot of money, but we waited for a very long time for that. If we had rebuilt that facility 20 years ago, we would have benefited from it for those 20 years, and the costs would have been much lower. As it turned out, by waiting for the $5 million gift, we ended up eating up the cost in increased construction costs. So that's where I am. It's a mixed bag in my opinion.
Anything else? Other comments? All right, we're getting close to time for closing statements. And of course, none of these questions are 30-second response types. So Janet, you're the first to respond to the next question. And like I say, if we could keep your comments relatively brief on this question. Go ahead.
What will you do to increase transparency in the First Selectman's budget process?
Oh, that's a great question. Now, again, this doesn't necessarily come under the Board of Selectmen. That is the First Selectman. But absolutely, when the First Selectman introduces the budget and the planning process, there should be a hearing very early on. We should not be waiting until March when the Finance Board is hearing about the budget to allow for public comment. Very early on, we need to bring that forward.
Laura?
Yeah, as early as often to communicate. And I think there's documentation, there's material, and it's just getting it exposed. The department heads put together operating plans way before anyone sees dollar amounts. And in them are things like their objectives for the upcoming year, any strategies, head count, what they're thinking about head count. Are they going to go to more part-time? Are they going to have less head count? So you start to get a glimpse of it. And I think we could probably just do a better job of, and that's one of my goals. Should I be reelected? I really want to work on our website. We need to just do a better job of getting the material out there. I think it's out there, but it's probably just not as easy to access.
Any other comment on that question? Otherwise, it's time for closing statements. Each of you has 2 minutes for a closing statement, and we'll let our timers clear their. Janet will go first. You ready? Timers? Okay, go ahead, Janet.
All right, so I'd like to thank our moderators and everyone at the League of Women Voters for hosting tonight's debate. As always, I'd like to thank my family, my biggest supporters and my best role models. And of course, I'd like to thank my fellow candidates, especially my running mate, Laura Erickson. It's not easy to run for public office. In particular, it's not easy to be a challenger, but Greenwich would be so fortunate to have her as its first selectman. But tonight, the winner is the Greenwich community because it has a choice, and through debate, voters can understand what that choice is. Every candidate here tonight will tell you that we have our community's best interests at heart, and that's absolutely sincere. But we have different visions and ideas about how to achieve them. I share Laura's vision to restore our quality of life, plan for the future, and focus on the needs of our community. It has been an honor and pleasure to serve as your select person. I have, and if reelected, will continue to add value to this board by being an independent thinker. It's not always easy, but I say what needs to be said, make sure our community is heard and every perspective represented. I ask questions and bring up topics that otherwise might be overlooked. I am collegial and committed to civil discourse. But most importantly, I am always mindful that the selectmen need to uphold the inclusive and forward-looking values of this community. So I thank you for your consideration.
Laura, 2 minutes.
Thank you. So again, thank you to the league. Thank you for everybody that made this night possible. I know it's a lot to pull together, and we're so fortunate to be able to have the opportunity to talk about our ideas and our views. We are a 3-member board. We have been very fortunate that we get to divvy up responsibilities and work on some of the things that we might be more aligned to, more passionate about, but continue to come back as a group. So I feel very fortunate having served 4 years in that capacity. And I'm just thinking about myself growing up. So I am a middle child. I have spent 58 years as a middle child. I have an older brother and a younger sister. So I know how to look at 2 sides or multiple sides of any situation. I'm always listening and trying to understand everybody's point of view and to come together with what I call win-win solutions, so that everyone feels that they've been heard, everyone feels that we're working towards something that we could rally behind, and that there isn't dissension or there isn't disagreement. I too believe in civil discourse. My colleague knows I am constantly reminding people to be nice and to think about what they post on social media, because we're all really just trying to do what's best for the town. I am proud to be a select woman. I'm proud to have served as a public servant to the community that I grew up in, that I've raised my children in for the past 12 years. And I think I have a record of collaboration and a commitment to the role. And I will always be listening, and I will always be learning. I will never say that I'm the smartest person in the room or that I have all the answers, but I will try to find them. I will collaborate, and I will continue to do so. Should I be elected or re-elected?
Thank you very much, candidates. And now we could ask the candidates for first select person to come up and take their places, and we need their tent cards. I should also say how fortunate the town is to have so many people who are willing to devote their time to the community. It really is wonderful and rare.
Thank you.
Let's see. I thought.
While they're setting up, I just want to make one thing. I forgot to thank Elizabeth Butler, who's my helper, because she was scurrying around, but we couldn't do this without her. And I think Sandy Waters, the president of the league, somewhere in the audience. So again, without her, we'd be nowhere.
What? No, we have another debate. Yeah, so that was the select person date. Now this is the first select person.
Are we all set? You have bottles of water? All right. It's my pleasure now to introduce the candidates, excuse me, for first select person. To my immediate left is Republican Fred Camillo. Excuse me, but could we have quiet in the, thank you. Republican Fred Camillo, and his opponent in this race is Laura Erickson, and she is the Democrat. All right, let's go to the debate. You've got some questions, and Fred, you will be the first to respond.
Do you believe that there should be a process led by the First Selectman that would result in a 20-year strategic plan for the town of Greenwich? Why or why not?
Thank you very much, Hannah, for your question, and thank you, Kay, and good evening, everybody. I want to say thank you to the league for doing this tonight, and also to express the town of Greenwich's support for what's going on over in Israel, and that we will be having a rally on Friday at 11:30, just to show our support. It's very, very important. It's not a political issue, and I think we're all in agreement on that. So the question is, thank you, Hannah, about do I think there should be a 20-year strategic plan? So when I came into office, they were doing 15-year capital plans. What we found out is after a couple of years, things get moved around, things change. And so while we always have a long-term view of 25 to 50 years, you want to have that bird's eye view of what's going on, what you want Greenwich to look like in the future. It made much more sense to look at the 5 out years right in front of you, because things do change a lot. So we've transformed it a little bit to do that with an eye on the future. We're always talking about, you know, when you're building a school, having it be there for generations to come. So you have that 50 to 75 year or even 100-year view, but we focused more on 5 years because things do change, and you know, something happens in a building and things get knocked out, and even things that we campaigned on sometimes that you love, you got to pull it back. You have to do what's right, especially when it comes to public safety and public health.
Laura?
Thank you. So I think I agree with Fred about the capital plan, that 20 years is a long time for a capital plan. Things do change. We typically look at a closer horizon of 5 years or 15 years. But the question was really about strategic vision, which means that where are we going to be in 20 years? That's 2043. That sounds like an awful long way away, but I can't believe my kids are in their 20s now. Time really does go fast. I think it's really important to convene a summit and talk about the issues that we're going to be facing in 20 years. We already know we have sea level rise. It's projected to be X number of inches by 2050. We already know there's dramatic changes in how people get around, how our school is going to look like. We've already seen the last 5 years how work life has changed. So we really need to be forward thinking and start planning for this. So we're not taken by surprise, right? And I think there's so much talent in this community. We have visionary leaders, we have, CEOs, we have incredible business leaders and community advocates. And it's not too soon to convene a summit and talk about what is our future going to look like.
Any other comment? Go ahead.
Yes, and no, I totally agree with that. And things do change. And so we've looked, everything we're doing right now is with an eye towards the future. So we're in agreement on that. When we had an issue with air rights a few years ago, I put together a group of residents here who had skill sets in commercial litigation, real estate, finance, and they came to a conclusion that it was worth a lot more than we were looking at it at the time. And so when the developer, who is a good friend with the town, said, I like what you're doing downtown, Fred. He said, how can we have a new building there that fits in with the vision of the town? So we've been working with them, and they're going to be presenting something. They presented something, and we'll be, I think, amending it soon, that really fits in with that. And yes, we're looking at sustainability, and we put money in the budget for coastal resilience, but it's not enough. We're looking, I'm convening a flood mitigation task force now that hasn't met yet, but the people have been contacted. So there's lots of things. Again, you have those 5 years in front of you that you have the immediate needs, but really things are changing. And that's why, whether it's climate change or whether it's Hartford mandates, you have to stay ahead of it and that's what we've been doing from day one since 2019 in December.
Any other comment on that? All right. Laura, you're the first to answer this next question.
As heavy rains such as those of late September become more frequent and pose a grave threat to coastal communities like ours, what is your flood management plan to protect citizens and property?
So we've had a lot of severe weather events that's impacted a lot of residents, and I think we're all deeply concerned about that. People's basements flood, their driveways flood, people are having water where they've never had water before. Part of it is we've had a lot of overdevelopment in our town. There's a lot of private development going on. I think we all have seen that houses have been raised and bigger houses are going up. The town has a significant and extensive drainage plan, which all new development needs to abide by. We've recently adopted new landscaping plans, which hopefully will help because there are natural things you can do with bioswales and rain gardens to mitigate the flood. But really what we need to do is to fund our Department of Public Works, our highway maintenance, our sewer fund, to make sure that we're maintaining our storm drain system, that we're clearing out debris from our trash racks and other drainage systems in town, that we're maintaining our facilities. And then we really need to educate residents about perhaps new building techniques. Some people may have to, if they're closer to the water, whether it be an inland river or a waterway or the coast, they may wish to consider raising their homes or putting their mechanicals, maybe not in the basement, but in a different location. Because the reality is, water will find a way. Mother Nature is telling us, sending us a very clear signal that things are changing and we need to adapt. So we do need to be more proactive in flood mitigation. I know we have a great new emergency management coordinator, Joe Lucella, who's working on outreach, but we do have a role in municipal government to protect residential and certainly our town infrastructure. And that is going to be a big part of my administration, is that we have a lot of vulnerable assets in our community, Cos Cob Fire Station, some of the schools, and we really need to start proactively addressing it.
Right?
Yes, this is the one thing people say, what's the thing that keeps you up at night? And flooding keeps me up at night. I've been flooded out 5 times in my life, the first being in 1972 as a little boy. And so we did a flood mitigation forum the other night. We've done lots of forums in the last 4 years. That was very important. And a few days later, we had a rainstorm. We had about 8.5 inches in about 36 hours. And the reason why there wasn't massive flooding was because when you have that much, but it's spread out a little bit, the drains are allowed to recover. Ida, you had 8 inches in 8 hours. Nothing can overtake that. It just overtakes everything. You can't stop that. About 2011, there was a study done. I think they said it would be $300 million to fix everything in Greenwich. What I mean by that is, if there's an area that's flooding out and you go in there and you get new pipes and new drainage and you make it bigger, if you don't do that all the way through, you're pushing the puddles somewhere else. And we've seen that all over. So we spent millions of dollars in the last few years, some of it coming from the federal government, on areas that we actually can do. And we're making a fix in Pembroke. Last week's storm, we had DPW workers and Parks and Rec workers all day and all night watching in Pembroke over the trash rack. I visited them that night. They were there. They I don't know if it would have flooded, but they did keep bringing things out of there. We dropped off sand for people to bag it. Again, but in the forum, we told people what we can do ourselves. But this is something that is going to be an issue for every single town in America, because when I talk with First Selectmen and mayors all over the state of Connecticut and New York, this is one of 5 things that comes up. Why? Because our infrastructures are outdated. They're all over 100 years old. It was never meant, as my friend and opponent said, that it was never really meant for this much development. So why do you think I'm always fighting things like 830G? Because again, when you take away soil and you place it with impervious surface, you're exacerbating a problem. So we're doing well by defeating a lot of those mandates up there. But this is something that we really have to work with every single person. But there are a few areas where the houses were built in the valleys 70 years ago. Not much you could do for them. So we continue to work with them. I visited one 2 weeks ago with the person there going over some type of things with berms and things like that. But again, when you get 8 or 9 inches in 8 or 9 hours, it's tough to stop it, but we have to do everything in our power. And even if again, I am more than willing to continue to advocate I know it's, we're under guidelines from the BET, but this is something, this is people's number one investment in their lives. And so we have to, if we can't protect it, then no one will.
Any other comment?
I would just add that if we can comprehensively plan for the most affected areas in town, there is federal and state money available to help us enact those plans. And so it is important that we take a leading role. Thank you.
Anything else?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. We have done a plan there. Things are ranked. So I have some friends in Coscob and they get flooded out all the time. There's 5 houses there. And last year, I think 2 years ago, they were up at down at 46th. The reason why is because the other areas had more houses impacted by it. But my old friend Mark Boughton, the former mayor of Danbury, came down. He's now in Ned Lamont's government administration, and he has told us that we took him to 3 sites. He said there is money there, so we sent him a 3-pager on a couple of sites there. He answered, but we're still waiting for some. He's pretty confident that there is federal money there, which will help us. So we're on that with Commissioner Boughton.
Anything else? All right, next question. And Fred, you're the first to respond.
What plans do you have for creating affordable housing that will work in Greenwich?
Thank you so much. So 830G requires 10% of your housing stock. It's not a great law, as you know, it's 1991. And if you haven't put $25,000 into a unit since then, it's not counted. So the old Armstrong Court where Grandma Camillo lived, none of that was counted. And it was built in the 50s. If you go by Armstrong Court now, it looks beautiful. It's all going to be counted. So the best tool we have is Greenwich Communities, formerly Greenwich Housing Authority. They're doing a bang-up job. Just a few years ago, when we took office, I think it was about 5.2% we were at, which is double our neighbors except for Stamford and Norwalk. We're about 5.8 now, and with all the plans in place and what's being done at Armstrong Court and Vinci Gardens, and eventually Quarry Knoll, that we should be close to 7%. And there's some other surface parking lots that we're looking at now to take advantage of where it's near public transportation. You don't want to take soil, right, and replace it with impervious surface. You don't want to do that. And as Governor Lamont said when he came down to Armstrong Court, and we're doing another ribbon cutting this weekend, I think, that Greenwich is doing right. He said, Freddie's right. Greenwich doesn't need Hartford telling them what to do because we're doing the right thing. But if we don't, we're gonna always have that 830G hanging over our heads. But it's not just to get to the 10%. It's also about for the people that are living there and giving them a quality of life. These are people, these are residents. Again, my own family lived in housing. They love it here. And to give them an opportunity to live here. And we also have the Housing Trust Fund, which is another tool. It's not our best tool, but it's a great tool that we would hope people could help us with some donations. That's a great message to send to Hartford to let them know that Greenwich is doing it the Greenwich way.
Laura?
This is a big topic, so I'll try not to be wonky, but I think we have a few tools at our disposal. And the best tool that we have is our state delegation up in Hartford, who have repeatedly told us that if we can demonstrate progress, they have the ability, because they have a seat at the table, to sit down and say, look, we're making progress. Don't force these onerous laws on us. And that's exactly what our State House delegation did last spring during the legislative session. The number of tools we have at our disposal are Greenwich Communities, as Fred pointed out, which are in charge of most of the affordable housing in town. We also have the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, which is a relatively new tool, but I think it's an important tool because it allows for not just affordable housing, but moderate or workforce housing. It allows the town of Greenwich to provide assistance to developers who are providing moderate income housing, which allows you to base the rent on area median income instead of state median income. And this allows our teachers and our firefighters and our first responders and other nonprofit workers to apply for this housing. The median income for Greenwich employees is a little over $90,000. So for a family of 2 to 3, that means they qualify if they make $135,000 or less. That is significant. In most areas of the country, that probably would get you further, but we know that our costs are higher here in Lower Fairfield County. And let's be honest, we all have heard stories of rents are skyrocketing. We need to provide more diversity of housing stock because people can't afford their rents. I spoke to one senior whose rent has almost doubled in 5 years. He's afraid of losing his home. We have a moral obligation to address this issue. We do have the tools at our disposal. And again, the biggest tool is that we have a seat at the table in Hartford to push back, because I agree. Everyone wants local control. That is not in dispute. But in order to have local control, we need to stop talking and stop testifying and actually start doing.
Anything else on that question?
Yeah, and we're in total agreement. I have been testifying the last 4 years in Hartford, and I, again, use Governor Lamont's own words. Greenwich is doing a great job. We're making great progress. And my friend is right. You know, the affordable housing, they want to go 70% of medium income. This housing trust would do 80% of local medium. So that's actually, it makes it a little bit more affordable, because when I grew up here, I would say probably 75%, maybe more, of the cops, firemen, and teachers lived here. You knew them, right? You got in trouble all the time because they would bring you home to your father. My dad was a drill instructor, and it wasn't good. Now there's about 22% of our police live here, more than I thought, but it's still a very low number. And a lot of them, unfortunately, are coming. It's not that in the last 30 years, a lot of our friends they were getting married and they moved up to Monroe and Newtown because they wanted 2-4 acres and they were raising a family. But now we're getting a lot of applicants coming from other areas where they're already living. So that's also adding a little bit to keeping that number down. But anything you could do to get them here, it really helps us. And you also want them here quicker. And God forbid, if there's an emergency and you have to, as we're seeing today, we have to keep them pretty close by.
Anything else?
Yeah, I just want to add one point. I did see some messaging from the RTC that said, we're allowing people from outside to come into our community. And I do want to point out there are priorities. The housing that is mandated, we have an employee in town who sends out emails and publishes legal notices when they're available. The first priority is Town of Greenwich and Board of Education employees, as well as employees of nonprofits. Then it's other residents, then it's employees, and the last priority is others. So we do have a priority list. As you can imagine, it's in high demand. So I think those available units are actually taken up by the first or second priorities. Thanks.
Okay. Laura, you're the first to answer the next question.
A lack of public engagement and transparency in the prioritization of capital projects has led to conflict in residents feeling that priorities are not aligned with community interest and values. What are your plans to improve the capital planning process?
So I've been on the BET for the last 4 years, so I have a lot of ideas. I think normally what happens with the BET, everything that's not approved in the current budget gets moved to the next budget along with everything that was in there before. And what happens is we've developed a huge backlog. Now, this past year, we scrubbed that number. We took out a lot of capital projects and we reduced the number by almost $200 million. So we have sort of a clean slate. But what I really think we need to do is to engage residents earlier. We need to use our neighborhood associations, our community leaders, our RTM district leaders. What I've seen is that people come to the BET. We have 2 hearings, one in January at the Budget Committee after the First Selectman presents his budget, and then another in March before Decision Day. And it's too hard. And it's that point too late. We did get a sidewalk on Shore Road, which was a bipartisan effort. We celebrated that last week. It was wonderful. But it was a Herculean effort to make that happen. And so we need to have dialogue earlier in the year, in the fall, before the budget is presented by the First Selectman. And we need to have, a better understanding of what's doable. Not everyone's going to get what they want when they want to get it, but they should have an understanding of where they fit in the capital plan. What is the priority? What is realistic? So everyone has a sense that, it's moving down the field, right? To use one of the sports analogies. I know my opponent is a big sports guy, so I'm going to put that in there. Just so we have a fair playing field. So it's earlier engagement with residents, a better process, and an understanding of, because we do have limitations, right? Like what's realistic.
Right.
Yeah, thank you. We have to stop agreeing so much, but we're on the same page. I mean, this year we're spending 112 on capital. Last year was 73 that I submitted. That was the most ever. And this year it's 112, and it's still not enough. And Laura's right. I think, we, just to clarify, it's not like we start the budget process, in late fall or early fall. It's 12 months a year. We're constantly visiting with people. Some of it doesn't see, the light of day because some of even the people, the advocates sometimes who come to us sometimes say at the end of the day, they trail off a little bit. But my opponent mentioned what happened in Old Greenwich, and I got a call from Maggie Bound, who's become a great friend. And we told her, usually everybody would want a sidewalk and then their neighbors would start fighting all the time. At the beginning, they want it, and then people realize, they think there's a liability. They don't want to shovel the snow. I grew up in Orchard Street, so I always had a shovel. It didn't matter to me, but I get where people are coming from. So I explained to Maggie that the DPW has a 75% threshold. They want to make sure most of the people are on board. And she was not deterred, and she worked really hard. It was textbook fashion and got it done. And so now we've went to Glenville the other day, and I spoke with residents there, and I'm going to move some of the capital around next year because it makes sense to do a sidewalk there that will keep people from crossing Weaver Street. And that was very important to them. So we'll have to, that's rejiggering that capital project for public safety and public health. We're all, try to be fiscally conservative. The budgets I've presented have been within the guidelines. And I am a proud conservative, but without public health and public safety, money doesn't really matter. So we're certainly out there constantly looking at projects and getting input from people, and they're not afraid. Ken Borsa could tell you, we get inundated with emails all day long, and that's a good thing because there's citizen engagement.
Any other comment?
Just briefly, I do think we'd benefit from a consistent long-term capital model. I think, normally, under normal circumstances, it has worked well, but right now we have 2 large school projects. So we need to figure out a way to finance those school projects responsibly rather than just delaying and deferring them. And there's a way to do that. Financially, it can be prudent. So again, normally it works well, but when you have situations where you have these big projects that need to be done, I think we're all in agreement that Old Greenwich School needs to be renovated, that Central Middle School needs to be replaced. We have to figure out a way. It's not political, it's a financial model. There are tools to do it, and let's just get it done.
Anything else? All right. And Fred, you're the first to answer the next question.
Should the Greenwich Selectmen or the Board of Education influence the selection of books available in Greenwich Public Schools or in the Greenwich, Coscob, or Byram Public Libraries? Why or why not?
Thanks, Hannah. So as a former high school history teacher, our administrators and our teachers know what they're doing, but also it's okay when you get some citizen engagement. And, I get lots of emails, and there was some people complaining about books that they thought were inappropriate. And so I called up the head of Greenwich Library and Kevin over at Parrot, and we had great discussions, and no one was talking about banning books. Some of it was quite graphic. And I spoke with Captain Bonnie of the police department, and there's a statute on the books that you could determine that it's actually illegal. So if you look at that, and I said, well, why can't we just put it in appropriate? For this 10-year-olds are looking at this in an appropriate place. And I think most people are there. I talk to people, it doesn't matter if they're Democrats or Republicans, they agreed with that. But no one should, banning books. I have never had somebody call me and say they wanted to ban a book. But certainly I posted a link where you can challenge a book. It's done all over the country. I don't think many, Barbara Glynn, who was the former president of the library, she said, Fred, I don't agree. Sometimes I don't even know some of the books are there, and I don't agree with some of them. But that's a good thing, right? We're all not on the same page sometimes, but I think we cherish our libraries. Again, as a former teacher, our teachers do a great job, and the administrators are not out to hurt people. Once in a while, there's a book that's objectionable, and there is a vehicle, a mechanism to challenge it. And they may agree with you. They've pulled some books and put them in other areas, and sometimes they haven't. And that's a good thing. So the system works, but I know it's a hot topic all over the place, but it works.
Laura?
I categorically reject any banning of books, any censorship of books. I think librarians know their profession. They know how to put books in areas of display that are appropriate, age appropriate. We have a young adult section, we have an adult section. What's horrifying to me nationally is books are being banned that are picture books. There's a book, I believe it's called And Tango Makes Three. It's about a family of penguins, 2 male penguins, and a young penguin chick. I'm not quite sure what the penguin baby is called. To me, that national level of messaging and that movement is reminiscent of Nazi Germany, to be honest. People should have the freedom to read the books that they want to read. Parents, if they have concerns, they are welcome to restrict books in their own household. But reading fundamentally is how we learn. It's how as a society we grow, we expand. And I reject any banning of books or censorship.
Yeah, and I agree. And so again, no one is calling, at least in my corner, for banning of anything. So we're in a free and open society, and you let the people decide what they think is appropriate. But again, if you get a lot of people saying, well, I think it's inappropriate to have a pornographic book, which is, and I've seen some of the pictures in the children's section, I do think that crosses a line. But again, at the end of the day, no one is, and I've disagreed with some people who have sent me things saying, this is disgusting. I've disagreed with it. It's all over the place. But I think we have to be very careful about saying when someone has a question about a book, that they're a book banner or there's some type of radical. And yes, there are some, the Penguin book, that example, I mean, that's ridiculous. And so you don't want to go down that hole. But again, you have to, if we're in a free society, somebody has a question about it, they should be able to call up the librarian. And they've been tremendous. Barbara and Kevin and now Joe Williams, they've been great. We're blessed to have them at the libraries. We really are.
Anything else on that? All right. Next question. And Laura, you're first to respond.
What is your position on using longer-term bond financing to fund long-term capital projects and town infrastructure?
So this is really a BET question, but I do think that it shouldn't be a limitation on the first select person to include in their budget if there's concerns about financing it. I think the role of the first select person is to determine the needs of the community. Board of Education capital falls under the purview of the first select person. And I think those items should be put in the capital budget. And you work with the BET and the RTM to say, okay, how are we going to finance it? It's Finance 101. Currently, we have a model that uses 5-year debt for longer term assets that in most communities and certainly in most private corporations is not the way it's done. You match the debt maturity to the life of the asset. I know people have been saying, oh, you're going to pile on more debt, the taxes are going to rise. That's not going to happen. There's a way to do it responsibly. We can have the discussion. It makes more sense to ask future generations who are going to be using those facilities to pay for the facilities rather than burdening the people over the next 5 years. So I've always said this, I really don't understand why this is political. I think if you look at a model and you look at the numbers, I used to be a financial analyst, it's very clear. So I hope we're all open to have that discussion because what I'm seeing now on the BET, we're just deferring the projects. They're getting more expensive, more delay, costs more taxpayer money. And we need to get these projects done. It should be looked at.
Right.
Yeah, and I think having that dialogue, we should always be open to ideas, no matter what corner you're coming from. I grew up in this town and I came into a town where there wasn't debt thrown at me, right? They made sure that we didn't inherit debt. And I don't want to do that to the next generation. That's why I work really hard on public-private partnerships to help give a little bit of relief to taxpayers. But certainly, Greenwich had what was called pay-as-you-go dating back to the 1930s. And then when I was on the RTM, the first project we did was to purchase part of Tuckman Pomerantz, we're on Orchard Street where I grew up, and we did a modified pay-as-you-go 5-year note. We actually paid it off early. I thought that was a great thing. It was breaking with tradition a little bit, but not too much, and getting something done. So you always have to be open, right, to amend something. Again, I am not for long-term debt. I'm piling on, but I've seen it in too many other towns where taxes great towns, all around us, over the border in New York and certainly in Connecticut. And it got a little expensive. And a lot of those people I know have moved to other towns that have a little lower mill rates. Not everybody is rich. A lot of people are house rich and income poor. And affordability is a big deal, We have 63,200 people here, 300 people here. Not everybody is wealthy. So we have to make sure that when we're doing it responsibly with an eye towards the people here who are on fixed incomes. We want a diverse citizenry, right? We just don't want super wealthy people here, and we want everybody who absolutely needs help to live here. We want a mixture. That's what makes Greenwich great. That's the Greenwich I love. That's the Greenwich I grew up in.
Anything else on that question?
I just want to agree that, one of the strengths of our community is our diversity. And I just want to repeat that, taxes will not go up 50% if we deploy standard financial tools that many other AAA communities use and corporations use.
All right, next question. And Fred, you're the first to respond.
What criteria do you think are important for selecting people to serve on town boards and commissions?
Well, that's a great question. It's anybody. We encourage everybody to reach out to us. We have interviewed, I think, we've appointed over like 300 people. We were told when we first came into office, you're not going to get enough people there for all these boards, committees, and commissions. We found that not to be the case. We're actually building a bench. I was surprised to hear one of the debaters earlier saying that we're not transparent. We're out there all the time asking people to test, to come in and interview with us. And if they don't get picked for something, we ask them if there's anything else that you're interested in. I've served on these boards and task forces and committees growing up here. I think we do a great job with that. So, transparency, where anybody who wants to serve, everywhere I go, I always give people my cell number. I do it on the radio. If you want to serve, whether it's an established committee or board or commission or a First Selectman's, we heard in the earlier debate, sustainability committee, that was something I put in place. The Emergency Management Advisory Committee, that was another thing. The bike task force, those are things that, and I had a choice, and some of them say, is it the First Selectman's committee or Selectmen? And I chose the Selectmen. I want to have the 3 people engaged on that. So those are all committees. I think most of them are listed on the website. I tell people, check them out. And sometimes if it's a First Selectmen's committee or a Selectmen's committee, you may not have to go through certain processes. Other ones you do, which means SNAC, and then the Appointments Committee, the RTM, and then the full RTM. And that's another thing. Sometimes I'm seeing once in a while a tax upon people who are applying for things. And that's ugly. And these are people that are volunteering their time. And just, you may not agree with them politically, but they don't deserve some of the reactions that they get. These people live here, they're our neighbors, and they have families, and we should honor them and thank them for at least putting themselves forward, even if they're not chosen for a particular position.
Laura?
Yeah, I think it's a wonderful thing. We have so much talent and so much willingness to volunteer in our community. I've been involved in a couple of building committees, and when I was on the RTM, these people have tremendous life experiences, tremendous professional experience. We can't thank them enough. I do think that the process is a little opaque. There is a Selectmen's Nominating Advisory Committee. I know they do really good work, but to me, it's not always clear what positions are available, what are the qualifications, how do you get considered? I was at a Nathaniel Witherall meeting in September. There was a gentleman in the audience who had submitted an application. I think he was interviewed, but he didn't understand why he wasn't nominated. I'm sure that Fred is right. His application is on file, and if there's an opportunity, there will be perhaps another chance for him to serve. So I do think that we need to be a little more clear about what our needs are. I do think it's a little unfortunate. There's one building committee where a member has been attending faithfully, really providing very positive contributions. We had a recent opening on this building committee. This person wasn't selected to fill a vacancy. I think that's unfortunate because when people show up, whether they be an alternate or whether they be a regular attendee of a meeting, I think they should get credit for that and be really considered for a vacancy when it comes up.
Anything else?
Thank you. Yeah, and I would love to, after the debate, if you could tell me who the person was quietly, because we call people all the time that have not been selected to let them know. So if somebody was missed, let me know. I appreciate that. And I agree. Sometimes, if there's somebody that hasn't been chosen, they may have already been on the committee there in another role. It doesn't mean that they weren't considered. And certainly, sometimes perceptions get out there and then it gets on social media and then people go around and spread things. And then next thing you know, there's a false post on one of the social media sites. And by the time you get home at night, somebody takes a Snapchat, they look at this and there's like 85 likes on it and it's going down the wrong direction. So, this is the era that we live in, unfortunately. So again, 4 years ago, when I came into office, I said, we have to be a little bit more transparent and communicate a little bit more. So we started some social media. I think we were on Instagram then. We're on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. We do a weekly e-blast now, every Friday. And Democrats, Republicans, it doesn't matter. People like all that and they like just it's not political. They like being informed. So we're doing the best we can for transparency, and you could always do better, right? So that's why we do what we do. Coach Vince Lombardi said, I always say this, you always shoot for perfection. You're never going to attain it, but along the way, you may catch excellence. And that's why we do what we do. We're not perfect. Greenwich is the best town in America, but it's not perfect, right? That's why we're all up here. That's why we serve.
Anything else on that question? All right. And Laura, you're the first to respond to the next one.
Our municipal nursing home is a unique community resource for all. Do you believe it should remain town-owned and professionally operated, or lose control and shift it to a for-profit?
So I think I think taking care of our senior population is a core community value. And I think it's a privilege to be able to do that in our community. We had some very generous benefactors in the early part of the 20th century who bequeathed us this facility for tuberculosis residents. And let's face it, healthcare is a challenging field. There's a lot of changes. There's a lot of regulation. We've just been through a pandemic. I think that the board of the Nathaniel Witherall is an outstanding board, that it's working really hard. There have been some challenges with the accounts receivable, timely collection of those receivables. The board has now put in place procedures. We're taking a write-off, which is never pleasant, but it's important to address the problem, have a clean slate, and move forward. I think it is the board's purview to decide how the facility should be operated. And it is professionally run. The board is talking about expanding its offerings to help the census. I think there are opportunities with Greenwich Woods closing. There'll be fewer beds in town, so that I think bodes well for the future of our skilled nursing facility. I also think there's opportunities with procedures that currently people are doing at hospitals, that everything is coming down, right? So there's other things we can do. What we do need, though, are guardrails, and we need accountability, and we need an understanding that if something like this goes wrong, if we don't, which it won't, because we have learned our lesson, I do believe we have to build redundancy into the system. We have outsourced our billing cycle, so we don't rely on when somebody leaves, everything is in chaos because no one knows what to do. We've professionalized that aspect of it. We do have some work to do. Fred and I have been working on this. The BET has been working on this. The audit committee has been working on this. I think we've made tremendous strides. And I do look forward to the contributions of the new board members that have been recently appointed, and hopefully we'll continue to do that.
Right.
Thank you. Yes, 4 years ago when I came into office, this was a hot topic, and it was for decades before that. And it's a cost to the town, but I agree with Laura, and I put together a committee to look into it, and Laura was on it. She's done a great job. Everybody on that has, and they've uncovered a lot of things that show why it's really hard for a town. We're the only one that does this in Connecticut, but it shouldn't always, that alone should not scare us from doing it. But also, we can't stick our heads in the sand. When I asked Pete and Roland up in finance a year and a half ago how much we have lost, going back as far as they could, and they got the last 9 years, and it was $43 million that was put towards it and supporting it. But that's not the only story. I mean, it's a town department. So you get threats of lawsuits, you get lawsuits. That's why most towns don't do that. Again, if the town, this process, this is the farthest it's gotten, and I think it's helped bring a lot of things, as my friend just said, to the forefront, and things are getting fixed. If the town decides to keep it as a department, things have to change. You have to then really treat it like the departments that I know are under the First Selectman's authority. You got to pay attention to it, right? And so with the unfortunate billing issue that came up, we've had, even when it was a 5-star, it had issues that didn't get out into the public. So my father was there, a lot of my aunts and uncles, my grandmother took her last breaths there. I've volunteered there with my German Shepherds. I've always loved it, but it doesn't mean that we can't strive to fix it. And whether it's an outside entity coming in there, the board of Nathaniel Witherall will still be there. You still want to have some control over it. And we're still going through that right now. So I don't know ultimately where this will end up, but having this conversation has been very good, not only for the people of Greenwich, but also for the institution itself.
Anything else, Art?
I just want to,
point out you've used less time than Fred, so.
I see that. I'm gonna
Feel
have to
free
catch up.
Oh,
I just want to point out, when you talk to people in town and their family members at Nathaniel Witherall, they are so grateful to have a place that cares about their loved one. My mom is 83. She's independent. She lives in New Hampshire, but we've had these conversations. They're difficult conversations to have, but it's important for all families to have them and to have a plan. I have great reassurance that there is a place to go for our seniors. I don't think anyone should expect that a skilled nursing facility should make a profit. I think that there are reimbursement for Medicaid patients that don't meet really the cost of providing the care. And I think that's okay. There's many other services in town we don't expect to make a profit. They're services, they're important. I think it's really valued, and I think it's something that makes our town really special.
All right, next question. And Fred, you're the first to respond. Yeah. You got it, number 9. Oh, your microphone. All right, well, let me read it so that it can be heard by those who are tuning in. Excuse me. What are your views on preserving our low mill rate to appeal to and attract more buyers in home ownership?
That's a great question. That's always been one of Greenwich's many selling points. We still have the lowest mill rate in the state. I think one town beats us, but it's very small. So for all intents and purposes, we still have the lowest mill rate in the state. It's important. It's important. Having relatives having grown up in Westchester, they would always complain about Westchester had county government, which we got rid of in 1960, but also Greenwich had lower taxes. And so how do you balance service, right? We talked about Nathaniel Witherall just a minute ago. The main thing there is delivering quality care, right? But you also, doesn't mean it's mutually exclusive about being economically efficient. Same thing here. You want to make sure that you deliver services to the people who live here, who expect it, but also if you can, you want to make sure it's affordable for them. Again, 63,300 people. The majority are not wealthy, right? A lot of people work 2 and 3 jobs to be here. We want them here. And so you almost have to look at it as, and that's how I legislated in Hartford. I always looked at it as, not my money, but everybody's money. And so you want to be very, very, very careful with that. So it's a balance. And how do you strike that balance? Greenwich has done a great job over the years. And that's a tribute to every administration before this, every board of estimate and taxation, every RTM term, all the volunteers and other boards and commissions. They all work hard. Greenwich has gotten it right since the 1930s. And again, we're not perfect, but we're going to continue to look at ways to deliver, affordability. And I personally think having that lowest mill rate is always something that sticks out. When people were moving here from the city during the pandemic, they were moving to Greenwich more than the other towns. And that was one of the reasons.
All right.
So I think a lot of people are attracted to Greenwich because we do have low taxes and we do provide many amenities and an excellent public school system. I think especially when you compare ourselves to Westchester taxes, it's a very competitive market. But I also think we need to talk about, what is the mill rate by you? Every election is a mill rate election, right? Everyone wants and promises low taxes. But then when you talk to people, when you're out campaigning or talking to residents, just as a matter of course, people say, well, I want my sidewalk fixed, or I want a school replaced, or I don't want sewage flowing into my kid's kindergarten classroom. What can we do about that? So our mill rate is $11.36 per $1,000 of assessed value. It is the exact same figure that what we had in 2018. But I think everyone knows that costs do go up. Do we want to pay our employees fairly? Of course we do. Do we pay our teachers a little more than our competitor communities? Yes, we do, because we are in the lower half of Fairfield County. We need to attract our teachers to commute down here. So it is a balance. I completely agree. My experience on the BET these last 4 years, and one of the main reasons actually why I'm running for this position, I've been very frustrated because I think we are underinvesting in our community. And I believe that these short-sighted decisions that are being made are ultimately going to cost us more money, and taxes will have to go up eventually because we're not planning for it responsibly. There used to be a bipartisan governance where we would say, okay, let's look out for 5 years. What do we need to do? And let's make sure we're building in our tax base responsibly for these capital plans so we don't have to raise taxes precipitously. It used to be a mantra of Republican-led BETs, low and predictable tax rates of 3 to 4% a year. 3 to 4% a year, I haven't seen that at all. We've had 0% increases. We've had, this past year, we've had a 1% increase. I'm not saying that's bad, but we're not keeping up with inflation. We also need to recognize we've had almost $32 million of federal money through ARPA, so we've had that benefit. We've had conveyance taxes, building permits, interest income, far exceeding our projections. So we are in a very good shape, and we are in a position, if we plan, to meet our needs. So keeping the mill rate low is a desirable goal. I will point out, when the Democrats were in charge for 2 years, in 2018, 2019, the mill rate increased only less than 1.4% a year. So I just want to shatter the myth that Democrats are going to raise your taxes by 50%. I am working right now, and the candidates for the BET, I think, are extremely fiscally conservative. They're all extremely professional. There's just no way we're going to do that. We live here too. We want to protect our residents from high taxes. We understand it's a value. So I think I'm taking up a little more of my time. I might be catching up. But I really, this issue, we need to just be honest about it. We're in a very high inflationary environment. The tax rates that we have put in place over the last 4 years since I've been in BET, we are not investing in our community the way we need to be investing. Thank you.
Anything else on that question?
Sure. I don't disagree at a lot of that. I mean, I do want to shatter the myth that the Republicans don't spend on capital projects, because the Democrats, when they were in charge, spent, I think, 44 and 42 million respectively. The last year we spent on the Republican administration 73 million, and this year 112 million. So so maybe there's a little bit of myths going on both sides there.
Anything else on that question? All right. This may have to be the last one. Laura, you're the first to respond.
What is your view on public-private partnerships to help fund or support capital projects, and what types of projects?
I believe in philanthropy. I believe we have a lot of very generous people in our community. I appreciate their giving. Many of our organizations, our nonprofits in town, are supported by these very generous people, and I think it's a good thing. What I think we need to stress, though, is they need to be priority projects. They have to be projects that everyone agrees is important and a priority. I also think that when we enter into a P3, we need to be cognizant of our end of the deal. We have a number of P3s in town, one of which is the Greenwich Library. They recently did an extensive capital reimagine project. It's beautiful. If you haven't seen it, you should go. Our library is one of our jewels. But they've come to us the last couple of years on the BET requesting money for an elevator upgrade over 2 years. They've given us reports that the elevators are lurching. There's been entrapments. The maintenance costs have increased. And for 2 years, the Republican majority on the BET has denied their request to replace these elevators. So we need to live up to our end of the deal. Another example would be the Cohen Eastern Greenwich Civic Center during the budget hearing process. There's $1.2 million in this year's budget for outfitting. We're building this beautiful facility, but people, my colleagues on the other side of the aisle said, well, why isn't that 1.2 million funded by the private donor? And my response to that is it's taken us 20 years to build this building. No one is going to give to Greenwich if we say we're not going to live up to our end of the bargain. And why on earth would you put up a facility and then not put furniture and fixtures in it? It makes no sense. So I wholeheartedly support it. I know this is something that Fred has been working on. I think it's a good thing. It has to be priority projects and we have to live up to our end of the bargain.
Right.
Yes, thank you. This was something 4 years ago, one of many things I ran on, and it became the thing, I guess, number one that I've been known for, which is kind of shocking to me. But before 2019, Greenwich wasn't totally accepting of them. They really didn't like names on buildings. There was a few, but not many. We've turned the corner now, and I think that's a really good thing. Again, it will give the taxpayers a break, but, and I agree, we put a naming policy in place. The minority colleague on our board suggested during one of our meetings that we should put like a threshold of 50% on it to name something, but that would have negated the $5 million that the Cohens gave us. So you have to take it on a case-by-case basis to make sure that if somebody wants to give something, and we usually, it's like a 15-year time frame, and certainly they can get first crack at doing it again. We have other naming opportunities within these buildings that we can do. We're working on another one right now for the rink, for the Hamel rink, that has to get MI first. But we're working on there's lots of good news around the corner. But you know, I think 4 years ago, my opponent was saying that brought up an issue about maybe public usage may be taken away, and maybe private entities would take it with their money. Never the case. Never the case. That's one thing. I grew up blue collar here. I didn't grow up with a lot of money. I played in all these fields. That's one thing I'm very guarded by. I spent 36 years in sports coaching here. I never would want to do that. And of course, we put things in place, guardrails, so that wouldn't happen. One person came to me maybe 3 years ago and wanted to give me a check for the rink, and he had a condition put on him. And I said, there's no conditions at all. And then when somebody brought it up 4 years ago about conditions, I went to Alex Cohen and I said, there's somebody in town government that keeps talking about conditions. I said, do you have any conditions on the Eastern Greenwich Civic Center? She said, yeah, one. I said, what's that? She goes, build it. So I am totally in favor of public-private partnerships. We're fortunate to be in a town where people are giving and caring enough to give their hard-earned dollars. And again, there's guardrails in place, and people are allowed. There was some negative votes on the RTM. I think it was 40 votes or so when we accepted the gift. And there was all types of things, and that's 230 members. So you're going to get input from the public. So we're, I'm 100% committed to continuing to look for P3s wherever and whatever we can. And again, getting 80 acres at $1 million. With the land trust taking up the other 1 million, 80 new acres of open space and trails. That's a really good thing. And we're blessed. And we heard other ones too with other organizations. So I'm totally in support.
Any other comment, Laura?
I would just add, because I think, the rink is a project that's currently it's in limbo, but we're hopefully making progress. But if there are naming opportunities or, people are seeking private funds, we should just make it very clear, this is what we're looking for. This is what we need. I think it would be unfortunate if we ever change the name from the Dorothy Hamel Rink. I think there are some, historic roots that we want to stick to. I mean, Olympic skater, I just wouldn't want and couldn't imagine changing the name. So I hope that, whatever plan or policy that we just abide by some of our history. And I'm sure you agree with me on that.
100%. Yeah. So if you've ever been to Oriole Field, Camden Yards in Baltimore, it's Camden Yards, Oriole Field at Camden Yards. We would never take the Hamel name off the rink. So it would be Hamel Rink at the Pellegrino Arena, right? Whatever. Not to put pressure on you, Joe. But just you absolutely. So just to get that out there. No, we're not looking to do that.
All right, the time has come for closing statements. So let the timers adjust. You will each have 2 minutes. And Fred will be the first.
Well, again, I want to thank everybody and my opponent and legal and voters and everybody here who came tonight, and the people of Greenwich who bestowed upon me the honor of a lifetime to lead my town, my hometown, for 4 years. And the things that we faced when we came into office right off the bat, right before the pandemic, not to mention that, which was the worst in 100 years and 500-year floods. But we faced decreased values in the home properties. We had 28 vacancies on Greenwich Avenue. Today, there's only 1. We've worked to make downtown a vibrant area with outdoor dining and free music concerts. It's a happening down there now. We did a survey just to make sure that we weren't blinded by what we liked, and it came back overwhelmingly in support of it. So we've done that. We've filled a $5 million hole, I mentioned with the recycling. And the cost there. But we looked at an energy policy. We have with the Energy Management Advisory Committee. We looked at environmental protection in introducing food scraps and textiles and getting another 80 acres of open space. We looked at public-private partnerships to get things over the goal line. God bless you. We've looked at public safety, and I've worked with the fire department, the police department, Joe Lasella, and GEMS. And we've redeployed existing resources. We've been short-staffed for most of the 4 years I've been in office. And yet 2 publications have us as the safest town in Connecticut, and one of the safest in the country. One has us 87 and one has us number 10. We still have a lot of work to do. We still evolve. All high-functioning and performing successful businesses, sports teams, and government entities never rest on their laurels. They continue to look forward. We will look forward to existing buildings that are underutilized and work on that. Parking, we're continuing that, and we'll be announcing something in the next couple of days, and one at the Board of Selectmen tomorrow. So lots of these things that we're continuing to look on. I'm running out of time, but I just want to say to everybody, thank you so much. I humbly and respectfully ask for your vote on November 7th to continue the work I started in December of 2019. Thanks, and God bless.
Laura, you have 2 minutes.
I want to thank the league. I want to thank the timers. I want to thank Hannah. And I want to thank the audience. You've been very respectful, and I really appreciate that. I am running for first select person because I believe we have public safety needs that need to be prioritized and addressed. My experience on the VET has shown me that the police and fire chiefs have come to us with requests that have not been funded, and we need to prioritize public safety. Our first responders deserve that. We've had pedestrian deaths in this town. We need to address traffic. We need to address pedestrian flow and bike safety. I also believe that long-range planning will save us money in the long run. I've been here for 30 years. I've been involved in town government for 20 plus of those years. My husband and I have raised 3 children in this town that have all attended Greenwich Public Schools, K through 12. I care about this community. I care deeply about this community. I know we all do. But what I've seen happen in the last 4 years on the BET, it needs to be addressed. We need a reset. There's been messaging that's been anti-ethical to who we are as a community. The bipartisan governance structure that I referred to before, we need to get back to that. There's an element of extremism on the Republican Town Committee. We need to send the message that that is not who we are. I've spoken to many, many people in town of all political persuasions. Fred mentioned the rally for Israel on Friday. I think that's a wonderful thing. I want to support that. But it's unconscionable to me that the message that went out earlier this week from the RTZ has not been condemned by our first selectman. And I really hope that changes, because that's not who we are. I appreciate your consideration. I want to say that I am running with an incredible slate of Democratic candidates all up and down the line. I urge you to look at our resumes. I look you to urge at our passion, our motivation, our commitment. Thank you.
On behalf of the league, thank you, candidates, for participating this evening, and thank you for being an attentive audience. And don't forget to vote on November 7th.